Welcome to the Brilliant People podcast by Assertitude, the executive search firm unleashing human potential and recruiting leaders to impact companies globally. I'm Linnea Jungnelius, head of marketing and strategy at Assertitude, and your host for today's episode. On this show, we look at the ways leadership is evolving in our world and share stories from the most brilliant leaders, investors, thinkers, and doers defining our times. Today, I'm joined by the CEO of TUSHY, Jason Ojalvo. Jason has over 25 years of leadership experience, all focused on digital entertainment and disruptive innovation. He spent over a decade at Amazon's Audible, where he built and ran the ACX and Audible Studios arms. It is owing to his leadership that the division doubled the amount of audiobooks created each year and racked up dozens of awards, Grammy included. From there, Jason became CEO for Jared Leto's Adventures in Wonderland event business, which he turned around and doubled in size. Today, he's at the helm of TUSHY with a clear vision for scaling the modern and sustainable bidet company. You may be picking up on a pattern here. Jason is someone with an uncanny ability to spot trends others don't see and a willingness to bet big on those beliefs, often swimming against the tide. On this episode, we'll learn how he unearths those opportunities and builds coalitions to evolve ideas into commercial products with innovations from audiobooks to the American bathroom. Jason, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Linnea.
Very welcome, and excited to unpack your career journey together. It is peppered with examples of seeing around corners and betting on spaces that may not be obvious blockbusters. How do you identify what's next?
For me, it's some things just kind of click, like a light bulb goes off and I'm like, oh yeah, why isn't the world a certain way? Why doesn't this product exist? Or why doesn't this service exist? Things just seem like an inevitability to me sometimes. And when I feel that inevitability, I'm like, okay, I want to focus on that. I want to help the company grow. Some things you see out there, it's oh, that's a fun widget. That's a cool product. That's a better mousetrap. But I look for something that goes beyond that and is really going to change an industry, or it's going to change the American public's way of life. And when I see that, and it seems like obvious in whether it's 5 or 25 years, it's going to be an inevitability. Like that's where I want to be. An early example of that for my career is like in the late 90s during the .com boom. A friend had started a company. It was basically Facebook before Facebook. And I saw that. I was like, okay, this is exactly what the internet should be for. It should be for, people creating profiles, meeting each other, connecting. And it just made sense that that's where it was going. That company was a little bit ahead of its time. So, not enough people were on the internet. So it got like 1 million users, not to the point of, billions like Facebook. But you just saw that was going to happen. Or I got on really early with a music aggregator, music distributor called The Orchard. It's since been acquired by Sony. Like this is the early aughts and consumers were still buying CDs. And it was just like, to me, it was like inevitable that digital downloads and digital streaming were going to be the thing, which I sort of understood from my earlier days in the 90s in the music industry. And it's like, oh, here's a company that's like sees the future also and just has to kind of work backwards and figure out how to get all record labels and artists on board. And just like seeing that, and I was like, okay, that's what I want to do.
You also spent a decade at Audible, really helping audiobooks take off in a mainstream way and become the booming $5.4 billion market that it is today.
Yep.
And by the way, I checked, and it is on its 11th year of double-digit growth, which correlates with just a few years after you started there. So could you walk us through like that exciting time? What was the opportunity you saw, and how did you lead change?
So I joined Audible when it was still independent before Amazon had acquired it. It was 2006. And there were a couple different kind of trends that were happening at that time that made me say, okay, this is going to work. So first off, the cost of audiobooks at that time was completely prohibitive. Like you'd have to buy them on a set of like 5 or 15 CDs. You had this big stack of CDs. You'd like changing them in the car. And that cost like $50 or $99. Like it was really expensive to buy an audiobook. So that alone was prohibitive. At the same time, the iPhone hadn't come out yet, but the iPod and digital MP3 players were getting more and more popular. So this idea of like you could have digital entertainment in your pocket at any given time, like that was happening as well. And then the other trend would be that because of how expensive audiobooks were and how expensive audiobook production was, only about 5% of books were being turned into audio. And so that was kind of the reality in 2006. But Audible saw, and I definitely saw as well, that this was going to change. So the cost of production could be reduced significantly. And that was what I was brought in to do, is figure out how can we make way more audiobooks for much cheaper. And because they're cheaper to make, you can afford to make more of them. And then how can you charge the consumers less than that $50 to $100 price point for an audiobook? And the answer there was clearly like doing it digitally, having digital downloads. And then the ubiquity of the devices that was happening at the time as well kind of pointed to, okay, like you could fit a bunch of audiobooks, which are less expensive, on this device and solve a lot of issues that way. And then you lower the production, you can charge, in our case, $15 a month to get one audiobook. So it's basically $15 for an audiobook, and pricing it that way would make it easy for the consumer. Similar to what we do now at TUSHY. There are these bidets out there for $500 or $5,000, and that's going to limit their adoption. But by charging $99 for a TUSHY bidet attachment, that is affordable to people, and they can take that leap, and there's less risk. My job as head of Audible Studios was to, in part, figure out a way that more than this minimal 5% of books could be turned into audio. So we just found ways to reduce the cost of production, and by doing things at scale, we were able to reduce costs that way, and having like simpler studios and training like younger people to become audiobook engineers and audiobook editors. It's just, so all these things would lower the costs. And then when Amazon acquired us in, I think it was 2008, early 2008, their idea of scale was just this entirely other level. So instead of making hundreds, Audible was making thousands of audiobooks, and Amazon comes in and is like, okay, great. What about tens of thousands? What about hundreds of thousands? How can you do that, Jason? And that was how we came up with this idea to create what became ACX.com. The Audiobook Creation Exchange is what ACX stands for. And so we realized that like there were all these rights, this 95% of books that were not being turned into audio, the rights were just lying fallow. So how could we kind of unearth those rights from big publishers, small publishers, independent authors, etc.? And how can we kind of put them up for sale so people could either buy them or bid on them? And that was the original idea. And we said, okay, let's put like the means of production in the hands of actors and these small studios. As the marketplace evolved, like we started to learn, okay, wherever there was like a hole we needed to plug, we figured out what to do. So we said, okay, there's not enough studios that can make audiobooks. There's not enough actors who know how to make audiobooks. Well, okay, let's train actors. Like how do we do that? Well, let's go to where they're learning. So we went into acting schools like Juilliard and Yale and UCLA and London Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. It became this new way that actors could make money, and that studios could fill their, time in their studio, which was, a sunk cost to create a studio. So we provided just so much work for authors and actors and studio owners and publishers. It's something I'm just super, super proud of, being able to kind of support these creative people, getting to make more of their art, getting to do their, what they're talented at, and then putting the product out on the market through Audible and Amazon. Like that was the best part. You weren't just kind of creating it in a vacuum and hoping someone would, sell it and buy it. So it's kind of a win-win-win-win scenario.
And spot gap, and fill those gaps continuously, and kind of thinking ahead at all times. So when you're creating a new industry or launching a business in a new industry, what's important and different about leading a company and developing a go-to-market strategy in that kind of environment?
To me, it always comes down to one thing, and that's finding evangelists. And that could take on a lot of different forms. Take TUSHY, for example. It's like, okay, how do we find the people who are going to evangelize our product? They're not just going to use it. They're not just going to, buy it and be happy with it and be quiet about it. But like, they're going to want to really talk about it. And so one way that we cultivate that is making TUSHY fun and interesting to talk about. So by creating fun marketing that you want to share, and we have some pretty outrageous social content, and we throw some wild events, it's the kind of thing that the customer is going to want to share and evangelize about. So they're not just silently buying your product and being quiet about it. And especially the fact that the TUSHY bidet it's all about cleaning yourself after you poop. And you'd think people wouldn't want to talk about it, but actually the opposite happens. Is like we've sort of created this world and this culture where it's kind of exciting to talk about your Tushy product, and you're really proud that you're like a change in the game and evolving and righting the wrongs of prior generations. Present it that way. People are like, oh, I want to talk about this. So that's, for a direct to consumer company or a consumer product. But when it comes to like services, and I've run a number of services business, it's about finding evangelists within the industry. So with ACX, the Audiobook Creation Exchange, when we launched that, we realized, okay, we need some evangelists. We need to prove legitimacy like from day one. So we went to some of the major publishers. And then similarly, we went to some really good actors and studios who did a lot of audiobook work and convinced them to participate and create profiles on this marketplace. So publishers coming in would be like, oh, that, actor and that actress and that studio are using ACX. Okay, this is legit. I can trust them. So getting those people early on, and then everything can kind of cascade from there.
So now let's contrast that a bit against your experience at Jared Leto's company, Adventures in Wonderland, because unlike Amazon, where it was a lot about growth and scale, there you were brought in for a different reason, to drive a turnaround. So what were the operational improvements that led to success there, and how did you effectively lead a team through that type of transformation?
With Adventures in Wonderland, we realized we were onto something, like as a business, and it's similar like to that inevitability. Like business is onto something. So this was 2016, and more people around the world were spending their money on experiences. And at the time, it was like relatively a novel idea. Like, hey, don't spend on objects, spend on experiences. Like create unforgettable moments. That's really what makes life great. And this company provided VIP experiences where like you could meet bands after the show. So we'd go on world tours with big bands, and there were always fans who wanted to spend extra, hundreds or thousands of dollars to meet the band and hang out backstage or have these cool experiences with them, go away for like a lost weekend with the band, whatever it may be. And so we realized, okay, consumers are ready to spend on experiences. And some fans do it for pure reasons to have this great experience. Others, doing it for the gram, as they say, and they just wanted a picture of them with someone famous. So for whatever reason, people wanted to do that. So I felt like, again, like we were really onto something. The downside was, Live Nation, who pretty much runs the world's touring business and venue business, realized we were onto something too. And they ended up creating a division that offered like similar VIP experiences. And not only did they do that, but they started to make it part of like an artist's touring contract to do their, you want to go on the world tour with us and make, tens of millions of dollars. Oh, you also have to do your VIP kind of meet and greet and events with us, with Live Nation as well. So it kind of hurt an independent company like Adventures in Wonderland. We had to compete with the big guys. We worked on like pivoting to other forms of entertainment where fans would maybe want to meet their heroes. So it could be comedians or influencers, celebrity chefs, etc. So anyone where it's like, I really want to meet them and learn from them and talk to them, and I'm willing to spend money on it. So just trying to make that kind of pivot was a bit of what we focused on while I was there.
And this brings us to your current work at TUSHY, where you're now tackling the fun challenge of disrupting American bathroom culture. Obviously, first I have to ask, why?
Why not? So first up, like every time I take a new job, my friends and like former colleagues where it's like, why? Like, why would you do that? Why would you leave the music industry for audiobooks? Nobody listens to audiobooks. No one's ever going to listen to audiobooks. Or no one's going to use a bidet. What are you talking about? No one's going to change the way they poop. Like my grandparents use toilet paper and my parents use toilet. I'm an 8th generation toilet paper user. Why would anyone wash with a bidet? Or, why would anybody create a profile on digital media? Social media wasn't even a phrase then. It was like, why would anybody want to put a picture of themselves on the internet and talk about themselves? Like, so people always think I'm crazy, but most of the time tells that things are successful. So in terms of bidets, though, why bidets? They're the best. Bidets are a complete game changer. They're way better for your health and your hygiene. Think about like you wash with water. Everything we wash our bodies with water. We wash the dishes with water. Before we prepare food, we wash it with water. Everything's washed with water, except somehow when we go into the bathroom, it's, 1892 again. The other reason I love TUSHY and bidets is so much better for the environment. So each year, 15 million trees are chopped down just to make toilet paper for Americans. So at Tushy, we're saving forests from being chopped down. And we think of our customers as activists. That's the way that they're like saving the environment is by using Tushy. And then the last reason that I think Tushy is amazing is it ends up saving people money. It's a real win-win for consumers. So normally people, or especially families, will spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars per year on toilet paper, literally flushing it down the toilet, versus if you buy a $99 Tushy bidet attachment, boom, like that's the cost for life. So yeah, it's just, I saw Tushy as like an innovation that, like I said before, like toilet paper was probably the last innovation in bathrooms, and that was in the late 1800s. So nothing's changed much since then. So I saw Tushy as an innovation there. But then also, I'm a little conservative too. So Tushy wasn't, and bidets weren't like a brand new concept. There's really been a proof of concept of bidets around most of the world, just not in North America and in a few other countries. I see it like moving to Tushy wasn't a big leap of faith. Like everyone in Japan and most of South America and other countries and all over Europe, like they use bidets. So it's just the Americans haven't caught on, and Tushy's the company that's changing that right now.
And you're 6 years into this journey.
Yep.
But I found really interesting is that you've grown with real intention and patience and profitability. You're now number one in the number two business. And look, we work with both sponsored and non-sponsored companies. I'd love to ask you and get into what's driven your decision not to take funding.
A little background, like one of the many Jason origin stories, like core Jason stories. When I was working as a business development director in the late 90s and early aughts, this is during like first .com boom then. The company I was working for raised pretty good amount of money. We were hiring like crazy, just hiring. And the company was supposed to go public. We were poised to go public. And then, walked into the office. I remember this. It was Valentine's Day in 2001, and half the company was fired. Like just downsized. The public filing was pulled. And then a few months later, I think about half the remaining staff was also let go. And kind of after experiencing that, I just became skeptical of like this rapid expansion using investor money versus kind of growing based on profits. And I said to myself then, as 2001, I'm like, hey, someday, I'm the boss. I'm going to do things differently. I don't mind gambling with VC money necessarily because that's what they're there for. They know it's a gamble, but like, I wasn't going to gamble with so many people's livelihoods. And then also the other reason I'd say is as Tushy grows and, someday maybe we'll sell the business to a larger company or who knows what, but like we just have so much more flexibility not having to answer to a bunch of investors who are expecting like 10x returns, 100x returns. Like we really only have to answer to what we think is best for the founders and the team. So I feel like it just gives us a lot of flexibility there. It's not necessarily the right decision for everybody, but it's the right decision for me.
So as you continue to make decisions that are right for you, talk to me about how you are approaching scaling the team. How do you balance people costs with the growth potential at Tushy?
So as I said, like I tend to be pretty conservative around hiring. We tend to hire pretty slow and like meet people a number of times. Try to meet them in person, go for coffee, lunch, see them in like a normal social situation beyond just the interview over Zoom. So we do that. And then we also test into things. So before we hire somebody, let's say hire a consultant is one thing that we do. Say, okay, here's like a very specific thing to focus on. Like, okay, we know we could be doing more with like SMS communication. Let's hire a consultant. And then if they can, start to make it rain and we think there's a there, as they say, then we can open up a full-time hire. Or we'll ask a staff member to be like, hey, can you spend a couple hours a week on this new project and see if we turn it into something, it can become a full-time role. It's sort of the way that I always worked from my first job onward, where it's like, maybe like the CEO would have an idea and be like, hey, Jason, would you, just try to start this thing and see if it works? Or with the ACX marketplace, it was literally like a 1 or 2 sentence email from the CEO of Audible. It's like, hey, we have this idea for like a rights marketplace. You want to like think about it and maybe write up a couple pages about it. And like eventually it snowballed and turned into something huge. So I like doing that with the team. It's like, hey, you want to spend a little time on this and see if you can turn it into something or see if there's, and then if it turns into something, yeah, then you have someone work on it full time or bring a team around it. Sometimes I'll do it myself or the C team will. Like for example, at Tushy, we said, okay, we got to get into bricks and mortar retail. if we had zillions of dollars, we'd say, yeah, let's hire a retail team. And, they need a vice president and then 3 salespeople and then 4 relationship managers. And we're like, no. Like, this is just, let's have the C team make some calls to some retailers and see if we can get on the shelf. And then once we get on the shelf, like, are we actually selling enough to validate hiring somebody? So we just kind of just play it a little more conservative in that way. Mm-hmm. And we learn. And also by having me or the team do it, we learn directly and don't just say like, oh, I hired someone, I'm assuming they're going to do it right. We kind of know when we are ready to hire someone, we know exactly what we're looking for in terms of experience and what the job's going to actually entail.
Let's talk a bit about trends in the broader direct-to-consumer space, because inflation is a global reality. There's more competition to acquire customers. Customer acquisition costs in general are drastically rising too. And you've got brands playing around with entering new channels. You've got direct-to-consumer brands exploring wholesale and traditional retailers adapting direct-to-consumer models and so on, right? So what's proven to be an effective marketing strategy for you? And what have you learned about what works and what doesn't?
First off, I feel like I'm very much a glass half full person, or we say a TUSHY bowl half full. But I feel like with like direct to consumer, I feel like the dream is kind of over. This idea of like, oh, you have this niche product and it's only available on your website and we're going to control every aspect of the customer experience. We don't want to give the revenue to someone else. And just the reality is changing. And then I also think a lot of consumers, especially over the pandemic, buying a lot of direct to consumer product, I feel like a lot of them were burned by bad experiences, whether it's, difficulty returning, bad customer service, products that weren't as great as they seemed in the ad. So I feel like more and more consumers are becoming a bit skeptical of direct-to-consumer pure play. And so the way I see it is like direct-to-consumer companies have to fish where the fish are, as they say. So you got to be at Amazon for sure, like maybe, also Walmart and Target and Costco and Home Depot, just wherever consumers are already shopping. And the idea of owning the customer, while I see it's still important, but you need to own enough customers and have them buy from you so that like you can talk to them, you learn, they give you feedback, it helps drive new product development, but you don't need to own like every single last customer. If you own 1 million of them, you're going to have enough information to make good business decisions. Some other trends in the space, I feel like brand marketing and performance marketing that used to be like pretty separate are kind of merging, and the two are being forced to play nice together, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So you have the brand marketers who want to put something in the world that's like very on brand and very beautiful. And then you have performance marketing who's like, are people going to click or are people going to buy? And sometimes, user generated content or AI voice, it actually outperforms like a professional acting voiceover for an ad. And in terms of like effective marketing strategies for us and like what we've learned, back to this idea of evangelism, like find those evangelists early. We have a saying at TUSHY that 1 TUSHY sells 5. And, admittedly, that's very ambitious math, but like you get the idea. So like we should create a product, create an experience that's so game changing and so amazing that the consumer has to become an evangelist and talk to their friends and family about it. And then for us, like we found the first couple of years, we wanted to be really outrageous. Our marketing was like, a bit unhinged. We kind of made a conscious decision to be willing to alienate, the wrong people in exchange for like bonding with the right ones. So we were going to turn some people off, but the people that we turned on with our humor, they were customers for life. They just thought we were amazing. That worked really well for us as a small company and had a really outsized impact. But now, like as we get larger, these kind of stunts, they have the same impact in terms of like the revenue they might generate or the awareness. But then now we do that just doesn't mean as much for a company our size as it did then. So we still do it, but it's less of like the cornerstone of our marketing strategist. And then it's the other thing that we're doing, the other trend that we're part of is just utilizing influencers and not just any influencer though. We call them KOLs, key opinion leaders. Mm-hmm. So finding the influencers whose opinion like matters. So it could be an influencer who's like a doctor, a GI specialist, a pelvic floor specialist, OBGYN, because TUSHY's great for new parents. So things like that, like finding these key opinion leaders among the influencers, not just, how many Instagram followers you have or TikTok followers. It's like, yeah, but do consumers actually listen to you, respect you, and want to buy what you tell them they should buy?
Yeah, really, you've touched on striking the right balance, right? So really cool, creative, that gets attention with serious professional thought leadership and opinions and kind of balancing the two, as well as sort
Yeah.
of the imagery and the messaging and all that stuff. And what you spoke a lot about actually is storytelling. And storytelling has and always will be a fundamental part of building a brand, no matter what space you're in. And I know you're particularly big on authenticity, if that didn't come through in this conversation already, right? So what's being authentic with customers mean to you?
For us, being authentic is we talk to our customers like we're texting a friend. Like, it's just casual, it's friendly, it could be silly. And then we have another thing we do called LOL, laugh or learn. And we want all of our ads to either make you laugh or you learn from them, ideally both. Most of the time we go for both.
Mm-hmm.
For us, being authentic means educating people about why this product, what it is, why you need it, why it's better, how easy it is to install, like just kind of just telling them facts that they probably don't know. So they're learning and then ideally laughing along the way. And then also being authentic to me is not overpromising. So we talk about TUSHY being game changing and life changing, but like that's not because I say so. That's not because the staff at TUSHY says so. Like we hear that from customers literally every day. I don't think a day passes without a couple product reviews saying this is a game changer. I can't change my life. It's rare that there's a product where you think of it as like, wait, there was life before TUSHY and now there's life after TUSHY. We repeat that and tell people, trust us, you'll love this product. And it's just important to us to be authentic about like, not only is it good, but it's going to be easy to use and then and then delivering on that promise.
I love that. LAL, laugh and learn.
Laugh and learn. Yeah. I would say LOL. It probably should be LAL, but
both, right? So another area I'd love to get your thoughts on in terms of authenticity is how you also think about authenticity, not only as it relates to the product, but also when it comes to your leadership of the team and the company. Why is it important to you? And how do you stay true to yourself as a leader?
I pride myself on being pretty transparent, pretty low key, mellow personality type of person. And I find that I can be, quiet and often sit back and listen a lot more than I talk. And that's because I really just am trying to gather input from the people who I hired them as experts in their respective domains. And I want to hear from them. And then I'll weigh in after that. We live in a world with a lot of right answers, a lot of wrong answers too. But like there's some leaders who feel like this is the way, there's one way to success. And I couldn't disagree with that more. I think there's lots of ways to get to success. So I want to hear from my team, what are the multiple options facing us? What are some different ways we could skin the cat? How could we grow? How could we solve a problem? And I also think I have a pretty strong willingness to fail. I don't mind failing sometimes, as long as I always say, and I tell my team this, as long as it's for the right reasons. We're taking calculated risks. We're taking risks, but they got to be calculated risks. So I want the people on my team to advise me on, different paths forward, even if it's risky, but I want to know like, what's everything that could go wrong? Not just how this could go right. And so looking at that allows me to take this calculated risk, as I call it. And then it also lets us like enter into any kind of new situation with eyes wide open. So, it doesn't guarantee success, doesn't guarantee things would go right, but, it lets you see the potential pitfalls, not just the potential pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah.
If we don't succeed, but it's in a way that we predicted, I'm okay with that. What I never want to happen is like not succeeding and be like, nobody saw it. Like we were blindsided by something. That to me, it means that like you don't have the right team around you or you're making bad decisions. But so far, when things, go well, it's great. If they don't go well, usually it's like, oh yeah, we saw that there was a 15% chance that could happen. And I guess that's what happened. I don't mind that so much.
One thing I also heard as you were talking was really about soliciting feedback from your team. So, it's not your path, but you're creating the path together. Are there any practices or takeaways that you could give other people on how to really bubble ideas up from within their teams and within the larger organization?
Yeah, I tend to take ideas wherever I can find them. And it's one thing I actually miss about having really small teams where it's just like everybody could be involved in every brainstorming. The designer's coming up with some cool concept and a product development person is, and maybe your business development person, like everyone has these ideas because they're so close to the company and its products. So I love the idea of just being able to get ideas from anywhere and not really worrying about where the idea comes from. Like we do one thing at TUSHY at least once a year, we used to do a more bad product brainstorm. So we'll have an evening gathering in person or in Zoom. It's like, okay, what's like the worst product ideas you could come up with? And then from there, sometimes like some really fun and interesting ideas come about.
What a fun practice. Maybe we should try that too. Building on those habits around creativity, I'd love to know where else you draw inspiration. Are there any people or philosophies that keep you inspired?
First, I'd say big shout out to my business partner and TUSHY's founder, Mickey Agrawal. So we've been working together almost 6 years now, and she's like such a fountain of creativity, and she thinks in such unique ways. She's totally fearless, and it's really inspirational. Love, love, love working with her. And I'm more sort of the mellow pragmatist by comparison. So even as CEOs go, I'm pretty creative. But then, someone like her, she serves as our chief creative officer. It's like a whole other level of creativity. So find inspiration from her like during pretty much every conversation we have. And then I'd say maybe the other would be around stoicism, which a lot of founders follow now. Yeah, what's his name? Ryan Holiday. He's like kind of brought back the work of Marcus Aurelius from 2,000 years ago. And as I read that, I'm like, hey, that's kind of how I was already approaching my life since I was a kid. Every morning, like think of like what a privilege it is to be alive. You get to think, you get to enjoy life, you get to love. And so I just love stuff like that. Cause again, like I've sort of been living my life that way and living my career that way. And now that it's become like more of a mainstream idea, I'm like, yes, so it's just kind of reinforcing. So I'd say that's sort of where I'm getting inspiration from. Some of it is new concepts, but a lot of it is just realizing that, things that you were thinking that you just somehow, because of your upbringing, you kind of figured out. You're like, oh, Marcus Aurelius was writing about this 2,000 years ago. It's the same, nothing's changed.
Yeah, he does a great job just kind of simplifying complex ideas in sort of really straightforward language. So at Assertitude, our tagline is brilliant people at work. In each episode, we like to have our guests define what brilliance means to them. So I'd like to hit you with a lightning round if you could please fill in the blanks. First one, purpose is?
I think purpose is something that comes to you easily and should almost feel obvious.
Leadership is?
I'd say leadership is creating a culture of independent thinkers who feel like owners.
Success is?
Success. It's getting to love and embrace and champion people who in turn love and embrace and champion you back.
Great definition. Brilliant leaders are?
I'd say brilliant leaders surround themselves with smart people who can connect disparate dots. Brilliant leaders take calculated risks, as I talked about earlier, and brilliant leaders focus on creating more leaders than followers.
I perform at my best when?
Ooh, this one's easy. I perform my best when I'm having a lot of fun and I'm forging my own path versus following someone's set rule book. I'll add one thing if that's okay.
Yep.
I'd love to offer your fans and your listeners a discount at hellotushy.com. If they're inspired to try our bidet or other products, we can give a 15% discount when people use the code BRILLIANT at hellotushy.com.
Thank you, Jason Ojalvo, CEO of TUSHY, for joining us and shedding a light on how to identify what's next and new for your brand, your industry, and your bathroom. And thanks to you, our listeners. That's it for this episode of the Brilliant People podcast. I'm Linnea Jungnelius. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts, and follow Assertitude on LinkedIn for the latest insights on how to lead, how to build great teams, and perform at your best. Until next time, stay brilliant at work.